Why have Jews and Arabs been at odds for millennia? Is it simply about land religion or power? In fact, the deep roots of this conflict lie in a family story between two brothers, between two children who share the same bloodline, Abraham. And it was from the moment they were separated that human history took two opposing paths. The millennia-long conflict between Jews and Arabs stems not only from territorial disputes or modern politics, but from an ancient biblical story, the story of two half-brothers, Isaac and Ishmael. According to the Jewish and Christian Bibles, Abraham, the patriarch revered by all three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, had two sons. Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn son with Hagar, an Egyptian servant, and was born while his wife Sarah was childless. Later, when Sarah gave birth to Isaac, she asked Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away, not wanting her son to share the inheritance with his half-brother. This story marks the first division between the two lineages, Isaac, who is considered the ancestor of the Jews, and Ishmael, who is considered by Islamic tradition to be the ancestor of the Arab peoples. It is from this moment that a historical wound is formed, a sense of rejection, loss of inheritance, and marginalization, which modern Palestinians directly associate with the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, which they call the Nakba, the catastrophe. It is noteworthy that both traditions, Judaism and Islam, acknowledge a common descent from Abraham, but differ on who is the rightful heir to the covenant with God. While the Bible identifies the covenant with Isaac, Islam holds that Ishmael was the chosen one. It is this difference that lays the theological foundation for disputes not only over history, but also over sacred identity and ownership, especially at sacred sites like Jerusalem. Understanding the origins of Isaac and Ishmael is not about assigning blame, but about recognizing the deep spiritual thread that is woven into the modern conflict. It is not just a political dispute, it is a conflict between two once brotherly families, now separated by destiny, faith, and historical memory. The prophecy of Ishmael in Genesis 16:12 is one of the most powerful and controversial prophetic passages in the Bible. As Ishmael's mother Hagar was despairing in the desert, an angel appeared to her and delivered a promise from God. Your son shall be like a wild donkey. His hand shall be against every man and every man's hand against him. He shall live in enmity with all his brothers. In the context of ancient Near Eastern culture, wild donkey was not a derogatory term, but rather a symbol of absolute freedom, independence, and untamableness, qualities revered in nomadic societies. However, the deeper meaning lies in the character of Ishmael's lineage, a spirit of indomitable will that was often thrust into conflict. Islamic tradition honors Ishmael as a revered patriarch who obeyed God's will and fathered 12 princes, the forerunners of the great Arabian tribes. Although he did not receive the divine covenant, like Isaac, Ishmael was still promised by God to create a great nation. And history has proven it. From his descendants, powerful Muslim empires arose, dominating much of the Middle East, North Africa, and West Asia for centuries. However, the hands against all character remains a prophetic highlight that causes contemplation. Not only is there a conflict with Israel, the Arab-Muslim world is also deeply divided internally, especially between the Sunni and Shia sects of Islam. The civil wars in Syria, Yemen, Iraq reflect exactly what the prophecy said. The conflict is not only an external confrontation, but also a clash between brothers. This prophetic event should not be understood as an accusation, but as a warning that the historical rift, if not healed, will continue to repeat itself for many generations. While Ishmael was promised blessings and many descendants, only Isaac was given a divine covenant by God, a key point of religious division to this day. This covenant was not just a promise of blessings, but the establishment of an eternal relationship between God and a chosen people, something that is emphasized many times in the Bible. Genesis 17:19-21. Isaac, Abraham's son by Sarah, his legal and legitimate wife, was born not through human effort, but through a miracle. Sarah gave birth at the age of 90, after she had passed the age of childbearing. This made Isaac a symbol of direct divine intervention, not human planning. The choice of Isaac, rather than Ishmael, exemplifies a key principle in Judaism and Christianity: divine election. A choice from above, not based on merit or birth order. This caused Abraham heartache. When he heard that only Isaac would receive the covenant, he prayed, "May Ishmael live before you." Genesis 17:18. But God answered him firmly, "No, but Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants." 17:19. This leads to a profound religious and spiritual truth. The divine covenant was not for the first people, but for those chosen by miracle. Isaac was the son of promise, Ishmael, the son of provision. And from there, the divine status of the Jews was established in the Bible, making them the chosen people. A concept that has been both a source of life and a burden throughout history, and has been fiercely contested by Muslims who consider the event distorted and who insist that Ishmael was the one chosen for sacrifice in the Quran. The conflict between Isaac and Ishmael's descendants is not just a historical or religious issue, but also a battle over divine inheritance, a deep and long-standing identity struggle. According to the Bible, after Isaac was born, his mother Sarah witnessed Ishmael teasing the infant during a weaning ceremony. The action, described in Hebrew by a verb derived from the name Isaac, implies that Ishmael was not only teasing, but also challenging his younger brother's inheritance. Sarah immediately demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away, saying, "The son of that maidservant shall not be heir with my son Isaac." This decision not only drove Ishmael and his mother into the desert, but also opened a rift between the two peoples. In the Islamic tradition, this action is seen as an unjust and cruel denial, creating a sense of hereditary injustice. The image of Ishmael, the rejected firstborn, has come to symbolize the sense of loss felt by Arab peoples, especially Palestinians. When the State of Israel was established in 1948, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced to flee their homeland, an event they call the Nakba catastrophe. They see it as a modern-day version of Hagar and Ishmael's expulsion from the house of Abraham, and it has created a generational trauma. For Jews, Isaac represents a covenant and a promise. But for many Muslims, Israel's existence is not just a matter of land, it is the denial of their existence. The dispute is not just about power, but about who is the rightful son, an identity question that has been etched in the collective subconscious for millennia. This makes any attempt at peace fragile unless it touches the spiritual roots of the issue. One of the core factors that exacerbates the Jewish-Muslim conflict is the difference in how the two religions remember the same story. In the Old Testament, Abraham is tested by God when he is asked to sacrifice Isaac, his miraculously conceived son, the heir to the covenant. This is a momentous event that affirms the sacred relationship between Isaac's lineage and God. However, the Quran, the sacred text of Islam, does not name the son sacrificed, but most Muslim scholars agree that it was Ishmael. The name change is not accidental, but rather significant. It swaps the position of the chosen one. According to the interpretation of Muslim scholars, the sacrifice event shows the absolute faith of Abraham and his son, who not only accepts, but is actively willing to sacrifice. If that son is Ishmael, then that places him and his descendants at the center of the sacred journey, something Islam sees as misunderstood in the Old Testament. From here, the Quran positions itself not as a new story, but as a corrective to what has been distorted. That is why Islam insists that Mecca, where Abraham and Ishmael built the Kaaba, is the supreme sacred center, not Jerusalem. This disagreement turns a sacred event into a symbolic battleground. If Isaac is the one sacrificed, Judaism retains the right to tell the story and affirm the covenant. If Ishmael is the one tested, then Islam assumes a central role in salvation history. The conflict over holy sites, patrilineal roles, and inheritance is no longer an academic disagreement. It is the root cause of modern conflict, especially in Jerusalem, where both the Jewish temple and the Muslim Dome of the Rock stand on the same hill. It is not just a geographical conflict, but a collision of two versions of sacred history, which cannot both be true at the same time. Jerusalem is not simply an ancient city, but the sacred heart of three major religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But between Jews and Muslims, it has become a point of tension because both are deeply attached to a single sacred place, the Jewish temple and the Muslims' Dome of the Rock, both located on the Temple Mount. In Jewish tradition, it is the place where Abraham prepared to sacrifice Isaac, where King Solomon built the first temple, and later the second temple, the center of Jewish worship and identity. However, for Muslims, the Temple Mount is also a very sacred place. They believe that this is where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven on his night journey, Isra and Miraj, mentioned in the Quran. On the site's central rock, Muslims built the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, two of Islam's three holiest sites after Mecca and Medina. The same physical location thus carries two different layers of spiritual significance, making control of Jerusalem a symbol of religious irreconcilability. The tension lies not only in its sacred importance, but also in the fact that both traditions claim the site as their rightful possession. For Jews, not being able to pray on the Temple Mount, where the ancient temple once stood, is deeply troubling. Muslims, meanwhile, fear that any attempt to Judaize the site is an attempt to usurp Muslim holy sites. The dispute over Jerusalem is thus not just a matter of geopolitics, but a clash of sacred memories, where each stone carries both divine and historical significance. Amidst millennia of tension and polarization, the Bible offers a small but significant detail, a glimmer of light in the gloom: the death of Abraham. When he died, Genesis 25:9 records that Isaac and Ishmael buried their father in Machpelah. This is the only time after their bitter separation that the brothers appeared together, not in conflict, but in a funeral, a moment of humanity transcending fate. What is remarkable is the order of the names Isaac and Ishmael, rather than the order of age, Ishmael and Isaac. In Jewish tradition, the naming of the younger son first is understood as a sign that Ishmael has relinquished his birthright to Isaac, a symbolic act of reconciliation. This act is not only a funerary ritual, but also a prophetic message. If two sons can stand together at the grave of their father, then their descendants can do the same. The image of the two brothers returning together at the end of Abraham's life has been seen by Jewish commentators as a sign that reconciliation between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael is possible, though the road is long and painful. In the modern context, when confrontations continually overshadow hope, the biblical passage becomes an important reminder. Both families are rooted in the same Father, and only by looking back at that connection can the journey of healing begin. This is not a naive belief, but a spiritual principle, that no wound can surpass the bond of blood if the heart chooses to let go of hatred. Amid decades of confrontation, a geopolitical event in 2020 created a symbolic turning point: the Abraham Accords. Signed between Israel and several Arab countries, including the United Arab Emirates, UAE, Bahrain, and later Sudan and Morocco, the Accords are more than just a diplomatic agreement. What is special is that the name Abraham, the common father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, was chosen as the central symbol of the reconciliation process. The naming of the Accords Abraham is not accidental. It conveys a powerful message that despite differences in beliefs and history, the parties can still find common ground in their deep spiritual roots. Abraham is not just a mythical figure, but the starting point that unites the three major faiths, and therefore also the ideal model for beginning a process of ending confrontation. Rather than focusing on the conflict between Isaac and Ishmael, the Accord invites a vision beyond history, a future where the descendants of both sides choose dialogue over confrontation. Despite criticism from some radical Islamists and not universal acceptance in the Arab world, the Abraham Accords mark an unprecedented shift in modern Jewish-Arab relations. For the first time in decades, peace is built not on coercion or military victory, but on mutual recognition of each other's existence and identity. On this basis, Abraham, the symbol of faith and promise, is no longer a cause of division, but a bridge between two seemingly irreconcilable lineages. A little-known but extraordinarily profound point of reconciliation between Judaism and Islam lies in the realm of mysticism, where Jewish mystics, Kabbalists, and Muslim mystics, Sufis, have discovered striking similarities. Although they appear in two different belief systems, both Kabbalah and Sufism share a common goal to liberate the soul from the ego, transcend the material world, and merge with God, the invisible absolute beyond form and language. In Kabbalah, the soul is likened to a ray of light emanating from Ein Sof, the infinite God, and the task of life is to return that light to its pure source through a journey of inner purification. Similarly, Sufism teaches that man is a ray of Allah, and only by shedding the ego nafs can the soul return to the beloved, the absolute love. Both schools emphasize divine love, inner silence, and the mystical death of the ego as necessary conditions for meeting God. In addition, Kabbalists and Sufis use symbolic language, poetry, and music as means of approaching the divine. Both traditions construct cosmic and spiritual levels. For example, the Tree of Life in Kabbalah, or the Seven Valleys of Sufi Fariduddin Attar, describing the soul's journey through each spiritual state from fear to union. These similarities are not coincidental but reflect a deeper reality. When people abandon prejudice and sincerely seek the divine, they speak the same language of the soul. Beyond all religious names, it is in this mystical space that what politics cannot do, that is, overcome historical prejudice, becomes possible. The mystics, without any negotiations or treaties, met at the deepest point where God no longer belonged to any one nation or religion. This is the most powerful testimony to the possibility of reconciliation, that in the deepest depths of faith, people who seemed incapable of understanding each other pray with one heart. While Judaism and Islam continue to maintain opposing positions on who is the rightful heir of Abraham, Christianity offers a radically different approach, not choosing sides between Isaac and Ishmael, but basing reconciliation on a new identity, one born again in Christ Jesus. According to St. Paul in Ephesians 2:14-16, Christ is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down the dividing wall of hostility. In this context, the historical division between Isaac and Ishmael is transformed not by politics or blood, but by personal spiritual transformation. The core idea of Christianity is that in Christ, humanity is no longer defined by traditional ethnic or religious origins, but by a new relationship with God through faith. Jews and Arabs, instead of fighting over their patrilineal identity, are called to become brothers in a new family, where there is no longer Jew or Greek slave or free. Galatians 3:28. This is not a matter of erasing history, but of transcending it, of bringing old conflicts into a new spiritual reality beyond inherited prejudices and hatreds. From a Christian perspective, a peaceful solution cannot be achieved by human agreements, limited by power interests and historical memories, but can only emerge from God's intervention through an inner regeneration. This process begins now in the lives of Christian, Jewish, and Arab communities who worship the same God, read the same Bible, and walk together in brotherhood. They are living proof that reconciliation is not a utopia. It is happening, albeit quietly. Yet Christianity also teaches that final, complete global reconciliation will come only at the second coming, when Jesus returns a second time to establish a kingdom of everlasting peace. In this vision, prophets like Isaiah describe a time when the wolf will lie down with the lamb and the child will play by the den of the serpent, symbolizing a world completely healed of hatred and hostility. The solution lies not at the international conference table, but in the hearts of individuals. Are they willing to let go of their egos and prejudices and allow a new identity, not that of Isaac or Ishmael, but that of Christ, to reshape them? For Christianity, this is not just a religious solution, but a spiritual revolution, turning enemies into brothers, transforming hatred into love, and replacing power with sacrifice. In a world divided by history, only one thing can unite humanity: a love that transcends all boundaries. The love of one who was crucified to break down the walls of separation forever.